Despite the dire situation at the front, the Ukrainian army has not abandoned its attempts to improve its position in the Kursk region. This is because the military and political leadership of Ukraine has accepted that the Ukrainian troops lost the battle for Donbass. Against this backdrop, Kiev continues to throw its last reserves onto the battlefield, in a desperate attempt to stay at least in the Kursk region. According to representatives of the Kiev regime, the presence of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region is supposed to help Kiev not to be an outsider in the upcoming negotiations with Moscow. In this regard, the Ukrainian High Military Command periodically organizes desperate attempts to attack Russian positions in this direction of the front. And even though these Ukrainian attacks are constantly failing, claiming the lives of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Syrsky, does not abandon attempts to move deeper into Russian territory. And today was no exception either. So, on the morning of February 6, the Ukrainian army launched another desperate attempt to attack Russian positions in Kursk region. According to a number of Russian sources, the Ukrainian invaders launched an offensive in Sudzha area. It is reported that the main attack of the advancing Ukrainian forces is directed towards the settlements of Cherkasskaya Konopelka, Olanka, and Fanasyevka. The main goal of the Ukrainian troops is not only to push back the Russian army from the city of Sudzha, but also to increase the zone of control in this direction of the front. To do this, the Ukrainian command deployed about 400 soldiers and 50 units of heavy equipment. According to war correspondent Yuri Kotnak, Russian Marines from the 155th Brigade of the Pacific Fleet have already destroyed dozens of enemy equipment. Yuri Kotnak noted that the Ukrainian army also suffers heavy losses in manpower. However, despite this, the Ukrainian troops have not abandoned their attempts to move forward. And this desperate persistence raises a lot of questions. At the same time, this Russian war correspondent expressed confidence that today's offensive by the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region serves a distracting purpose, and that the main attack will be directed toward the Belgorod region. I hope that the Russian command is ready for all possible developments, as everything that is happening indicates that the enemy is preparing a strike in a completely different place, war correspondent Yuri Kotnak said. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has officially announced that today's Ukrainian army's offensive in Sudzha area has completely failed. The Russian Defense Ministry noted that over the past 10 hours, the Ukrainian army had lost 150 soldiers, 26 infantry fighting vehicles, 19 engineering vehicles, and 5 tanks. At the same time, the Russian military admitted that the Ukrainian command continues to try to introduce the most combat-ready units into the Kursk region, consisting not only of newly mobilized Ukrainian soldiers, but also of foreign mercenaries, many of whom are active duty soldiers and officers of NATO allied countries. At the same time, representatives of the Russian military department have officially admitted that over the past 5 days, Russian missile forces have managed to destroy 3 enemy brigades that tried to secretly enter the territory of the Kursk region to strengthen the Ukrainian grouping in the city of Sudzha. Moreover, a few hours ago, the Russian Defense Ministry published another footage of the destruction of Ukrainian and NATO forces trying to enter the border areas of the Kursk region. So, the presented frames show the accumulation of manpower of the 516th Battalion of the 1st Separate Elite Special Forces Brigade of the Ukrainian Army. This enemy brigade was discovered in the area of the settlement of Steskovka, SUMY region. During the monitoring of the area, the Russian reconnaissance drone counted 60 pieces of heavy equipment and 160 enemy soldiers. Moreover, the sources in the Russian Defense Ministry noted that 20 U.S. Army Rangers were also part of this elite brigade, and that they were all trying to enter the Kursk region unnoticed. In this regard, it was decided to immediately launch a missile strike on the concentration of enemy forces. So, at 2 a.m. Moscow time, in the dead of night, the combat crew of the Iskander system dealt a crushing blow to the enemy. The footage clearly shows how the Russian ballistic missile Iskander-M got its target precisely, destroying the enemy's manpower and equipment. All life within a radius of several hundred meters was completely destroyed. Later, Russian drones confirmed the destruction of 50 units of enemy heavy equipment, 130 Ukrainian Special Forces soldiers, and 20 U.S. Army Rangers. Thus, Russian intelligence has once again demonstrated the high efficiency of its work. The regular discovery and destruction of enemy manpower in the SUMY region not only prevents the Ukrainian command and its NATO military advisors from significantly strengthening the Ukrainian grouping in the Kursk region, but also deprives the Ukrainian army and NATO forces of their best and most combat-ready units. Against this backdrop, the psychological state of the head of the Kiev regime has once again deteriorated rapidly. In particular, over the past 24 hours, this political clown has made several ridiculous statements that raised eyebrows even in Western countries. For example, yesterday, under the influence of prohibited substances, this dead man walking, in all seriousness, said that Ukraine won the war, and that the United States should no longer be afraid of Russia, since Ukraine has destroyed Moscow's military might. I urge Washington not to be afraid of Moscow anymore, as Ukraine has destroyed Russia's military might. Ukraine has destroyed all the experienced soldiers and officers of the Russian army. Ukraine did not allow the Russians to invade NATO countries. Only thanks to Ukraine's victory, the United States and NATO learned so much about how the Russian army fights. And this is a priceless experience for the West, Volodymyr Zelensky said. Well, my dear truth seekers, as you have already guessed, the closer we get to the end of this war, the more absurd statements we will hear from this political clown. It seems that this clown will really go down in history as the greatest beggar, who went crazy against the backdrop of a humiliating defeat in this bloody war, as a result of which Ukraine lost dozens of cities and more than 1 million soldiers.